Hello everyone, welcome to a new video. So we are starting with a very new subject, that is Museum and Museology. This is a skill enhancement course that is offered by Delhi University. So we are starting with this course. We will cover the whole syllabus of this course. So let's see the syllabus of this course. So firstly it is given unit 1. So unit 1 में basically हमें जानने को मिलेगा about the concept of museum and museology, and with the help of International Council of Museum, that is ICOM definition. This is because many organizations across the world define museum time to time, like the American Association of Museum, Museum Association in Great Britain, etc. But the final and the latest definition of museum that was accepted in all the countries was of ICOM. It went through various amendments, and many definitions got amended and updated and modified, and the final definition and the latest definition that is accepted all around the countries was of the ICOM. So that's why we are taking help to understand the concept of museum and museology through the International Council of Museum. So we need to understand the meaning, purpose, changing role of museums. Also, we need to understand the history of the colonial museums and their transformation into national museums in the post independence era. So basically हमें museum का evolution देखना है from the colonial period to the post independence era, कैसे उसका transformation हुआ. ऑल्सो हमें केस स्टडी देखना है ऑफ द वेरियस नेशनल म्यूजियम्स एंड उसका मेकिंग कैसे हुआ, उसका हिस्टोरिकल ट्रेजेडी क्या था और उसका इवोल्यूशन कैसे हुआ. एंड वी ऑल्सो नीड टू अंडरस्टैंड द बैकग्राउंड ऑफ द म्यूजियम मूवमेंट इन इंडिया. And last, we need to know the concept of new museology and how new museology is impacting museums. We need to take example of the museum that is following the methodology of the new museology, and how new museums have become an agent of change in the museum world. So let's start this video. अगर वीडियो आपको पसंद आती है तो लाइक शेयर सब्सक्राइब जरूर करना. So we will first see the definition of the museum. Many organizations across the world define museum time to time, like by the American Association of Museum, Museum Association in Great Britain, etc. So बहुत सारे organizations थे, they try to define museum across the world from time to time. For example, American Association of Museum, Museum Association in Great Britain, etc. But after the formation of ICOM, that stands for the International Council of Museums, in 1946, this is important, when the formation of the International Council of Museum take place, so it is 1946. So after the formation of this organization of the museum professionals across the world, they try to define museum. So they define museum in its statutes mentioned in Article 3, Section 1, so which is now acceptable. So their definition is now acceptable in all the countries. So ICOM went through few amendments because they studied the previous definitions and they tried to amend these definitions and try to modify and update the definition of the museum in accordance with the changing demands of the professionals of the ICOM, the organization of the museum professionals. So according to their demand, they tried to amend the definition, they tried to modify and update it according to their changing demand. So the latest definition of the museum by ICOM, which is adopted in the Second General Assembly in Vienna, Australia, held on August 24, 2007, amended on the last definition which was amended in 2001. So basically जो last definition था that got amended in 2001. So वो जो 2001 में जो definition दिया गया था उसको अपडेट किया गया इन द सेकेंड जनरल असेंबली दैट हेल्ड इन वियना, ऑस्ट्रेलिया. और उसी वियना, ऑस्ट्रेलिया में जो कि जनरल असेंबली हुआ, इसमें जो अमेंडमेंट टेक प्लेस किया वो एक्सेप्ट किया गया एज द लेटेस्ट डेफिनेशन ऑफ द म्यूजियम. और द लेटेस्ट डेफिनेशन ऑफ द म्यूजियम वाज गिवन बाय आईकॉम, जिसको कि अडॉप्ट किया गया सेकेंड जनरल असेंबली में दैट हेल्ड इन वियना, ऑस्ट्रेलिया. एंड दैट जनरल असेंबली हेल्ड ऑन अगस्त 24, 2007. और यही जो है हमारा वो लेटेस्ट डेफिनेशन है. सो अकॉर्डिंग टू दिस, म्यूजियम इज डिफाइंड एज, सो बेसिकली दिस डेफिनेशन शोज द मल्टीफेसेट functions of the museum. So it defines museum that museum is a non-profit permanent institution in the service of a society and its development. So basically museum एक non-profit permanent institution है that provides service to the society and works for its development, that is open to the public, and the main function is to acquire, conserve, researches, communicates and exhibits the tangible. Tangible का मतलब होता है physical object या structure that have historical, cultural, artistic or scientific value. Like example, artwork, artifacts, monuments, buildings, landscapes and archaeological sites. सो ये सारे जो होते हैं ये टैंजिबल के अंदर आते हैं। और इनटैंजिबल हेरिटेज बोले तो प्रैक्टिसेस, रिप्रेजेंटेशन, एक्सप्रेशंस, नॉलेज, स्किल्स, कल्चरल हेरिटेज ले लो, या फिर आप ओरल ट्रेडिशन, रिचुअल्स, क्राफ्टमैनशिप, लैंग्वेज, so these all comes under the intangible heritage of humanity and its environment. So basically it exhibits the tangible and intangible heritage of humanity and its environment for the purpose of it works on intangible and intangible heritage of humanity and its environment for the purpose. The main purpose is to provide the education, study and enjoyment to the public. The museums are vital for the preservation of cultural and natural resources. Museums play a vital role in the preservation of cultural and natural heritage, and also it plays a very important role in education and community engagement, because it provides education and helps in the community engagement. It also encourages the enjoyment among the individuals. Then we need to understand the concept of museology. So basically museology is the study of museum. Museums came into existence before museology, and the evolution and the development of museums led to museology, because people got and the organizations got engaged in studying the museums. The emergence of museology was accomplished with the actions related to museum. So the actions related to museum were indirectly the cause for the emergence of the museology. The development of museums paved the way for museology. So before 1870, museums were very simple. Amateurs basically they used to collect and put their stuffs behind the class. It was not basically for earning money, or so it used to be very simple in the colonial times. Subsequently, in 20th century, museology was found. But after the transformation, after the development in 20th century museology, this term was found, which is basically the study of the museums. What is museology? So, museology is the study of museums. Museology is the theoretical study of museum practices. It encompasses the history and development of museums, that how the background, the development of museums take place, the organization and museum management. It also explains us about the organization and the museum management. Museology focuses on the preserving, displaying and accessing objects. The science or practice of organizing, arranging and managing museums. All these terms referred to as museology. In 1972, ICOM, that is the International Council of Museum, it defined museology in a detailed manner. So museology is museum science. So how it defined? So the study of history and background of museum. म्यूजियम का जो स्टडी करते हैं उसके बैकग्राउंड, उसके हिस्ट्री के बारे में, और उसका क्या रोल है सोसाइटी में, उसके स्पेसिफिक सिस्टम्स, दैट हाउ इट रिसर्चेस द रिलेशनशिप विद द फिजिकल एनवायरनमेंट एंड द क्लासिफिकेशन ऑफ डिफरेंट काइंड्स ऑफ म्यूजियम्स, इट्स रोल्स, स्कोप एंड इट्स फंक्शन. सो ओवरऑल द स्टडी अबाउट द म्यूजियम, इट ऑल कम्स अंडर म्यूजियोलॉजी. So in brief, अगर आपको म्यूजियोलॉजी को डिफाइन करना हो, so you can define that म्यूजियोलॉजी is the branch of knowledge and concerned with the study of the purposes and organizations of the museum. Aims and objectives of museology. So museology is the science of museum management. It basically deals with the museum management and its study. So museology by nature is both science and humanities. The main aim of museology is study cum training. So basically it focuses on the study and also on the training. It trains person to develop and maintain museums. The main purpose is to educate the visitors. Collection of specimens, art, archaeological objects, etc. It also practices the function of documentation, research, collection, storage and displaying. Conservation is the bedrock of museology. So basically, if it is asked what are the main functions or the main fundamental characteristics of museology, so you have to state these 8 functions, that is collection, maintenance of the building, documentation, display, presentation, research and publication, education, public relation and awareness, conservation and preservation. And also one important function is organizing the webinars, workshops. So we will discuss all these in detail in the unit 2. So it is given in the unit 2, where we will discuss about the functions of the museum and the various types of museums. What is the main role of museology? So there are various roles, that it provides various courses of study, training and research. It also provides academic guidance and leadership to the visitors, publishing, to collect, preserve, interpret, display objects, artistic, cultural and scientific, education of the public so that they can interact. They contextualize things, that what was the history of that artifact, this monument, and how you can relate it to the present time. entertaining and enlightening, preservation and safeguarding the previous objects, because there is two things in the museum. One, the storage, and the other is the displaying area. So storage is the main component of the museum, because only one third of the object is displayed and the two third is kept for the storage purpose. So basically the important function of museology is to the preservation and safeguarding the precious objects. History and evolution of museums in India फ्रॉम कॉलोनियल टाइम्स टू द पोस्ट इंडिपेंडेंस एरा. सो वीडियो पे लास्ट तक बने रहिए. वीडियो को पसंद आती है तो लाइक शेयर सब्सक्राइब जरूर करना. सो लाइक सी द इंट्रोडक्शन एंड अर्ली रेफरेंसेस. सो जब एशियाटिक सोसाइटी ऑफ बंगाल का एस्टैब्लिशमेंट हुआ बाय विलियम जोन्स इन 1784, सो दिस सोसाइटी प्लेज अ मेजर रोल. इस सोसाइटी के एस्टैब्लिशमेंट के बाद ही इट मार्क द बिगनिंग ऑफ द म्यूजियम मूवमेंट्स इन इंडिया. सो ये जो सोसाइटी थी एक मेजर रोल प्ले की इन द स्टडी एंड प्रिजर्वेशन ऑफ इंडियाज रिच कल्चरल हेरिटेज इंक्लूडिंग इट्स हिस्ट्री, आर्ट एंड नेचुरल हिस्ट्री. सो इट ऑल्सो लेड द ग्राउंड वर्क फॉर द एस्टैब्लिशमेंट ऑफ सेवरल म्यूजियम्स, जिसमें कि इंडियन म्यूजियम इन कोलकाता भी आता है, विच इज द ओल्डेस्ट एंड द लार्जेस्ट म्यूजियम ऑफ आवर कंट्री. सो अगर आप एनेसेंट इंडियन टेक्स्ट भी देखोगे तो उसमें भी आपको कहीं ना कहीं एनेसेंट म्यूजियम्स और कलेक्शंस का आपको कहीं ना कहीं मेंशन्ड मिलेगा. लाइक इट टॉक्स अबाउट द आर्ट गैलरीज, जिसको कि चित्रशाला नाम से मेंशन किया गया है. लाइब्रेरीज दैट इज नोन एज द सरस्वती भंडार एंड द कलेक्शन ऑफ वैल्यूएबल आइटम्स, जिसको कि तोसी खानास बोला गया है. ये सारी गैलरीज ऐसी प्लेसेस हुआ करती थी जहाँ पे किंग और नॉबल्स बैठ के इनको एंजॉय किया करते थे और रिलैक्स किया करते थे. इवन दो ये सारे बहुत ही इंपॉर्टेंट हुआ करते थे, बट दे वेयर नॉट लाइक द मॉडर्न म्यूजियम्स जो कि अभी के टाइम पे अवेलेबल है. उससे ये सारे म्यूजियम्स काफी डिफरेंट हुआ करते थे. दो दे होल्ड अ सिग्निफिकेंट इंपॉर्टेंस बिकॉज दे हेल्प इन प्रिजर्विंग द रिच कल्चरल हेरिटेज. अर्ली म्यूजियम components. So in ancient India, main historical monuments and sites served as the early version of museums. So ancient India में बहुत सारे ऐसे historical monuments और sites थे जो कि जिनको माना जाता है the early version of the museums. जिसका एग्जाम्पल दे रखा है अशोका's inscription on rocks and pillars and the caves of Ajanta and Ellora, जो कि ब्यूटीफुल पेंटिंग्स और स्कल्पचर से भरे पड़े हैं और वो हमें बहुत सारे इन्फॉर्मेशन देते हैं, लॉट ऑफ इन्फॉर्मेशन अबाउट द हिस्ट्री एंड कल्चर. बट जैसे कि आज के टाइम पे म्यूजियम्स जो है वो पब्लिक के लिए ओपन रहता है फॉर द पर्पस ऑफ एंजॉयमेंट, स्टडी, एजुकेशन. बट उस टाइम पे ये जो थे वो ओपन नहीं थे पब्लिक के लिए. दो दे यूज टू गिव अ लॉट ऑफ इन्फॉर्मेशन बट दे वेयर नॉट ओपन टू द पब्लिक लाइक टुडेज म्यूजियम. Development of museum movement. So the development of museum in India happened in several phases, and also there was several factors that affected the development of museums in India. First was the British encouragement. So British officials in India who had seen museums in their country supported the idea of starting museums in India. Second factor is the support from Indian princes. So जो royal families थी India में, they also helped in establishing museums. Philanthropic societies basically include the groups of learned and generous people. They also donated the skills, knowledge and the collection to start museums. Fourth factor is archaeological surveys of India. So this organization also helped in creating museums at different historical sites. And fifth factor is key figures. So the important peoples like Lord Curzon, John Marshall of that time, so they played a big role in the museum movement. The history of museums in India and its evolution is divided into 5 major phases. So first is the formative phase, that was between 1796 to 1858. So this phase started with the Asiatic Society of Bengal. So basically that was founded by the William Jones. So India's first museum was set up in Calcutta in 1880. That was the इंडियन म्यूजियम इन कोलकाता. सो वो सेटअप हुआ 1884 में और उसके बाद मद्रास में और बॉम्बे में भी म्यूजियम सेटअप हुए. द सेकेंड फेज इज ऑफ द विक्टोरिया एरा 1858 टू 1899. सो आफ्टर द 1857 अपराइजिंग जो ब्रिटिश गवर्नमेंट थी, दे took control from the East India Company and they focused on preserving India's cultural heritage. Archaeological Survey of India set up किया गया in 1861, leading to the creation of many provincial museums. Third is the era of Lord Curzon and John Marshall. That was between 1899 to 1928. Lord Curzon and John Marshall did a lot to preserve art and archaeological sites. Many site museums were established during this time. fourth one is the pre-independence era. That was between 1928 to 1947. So more museums were created, such as the Central Asian Antiquities Museum in 1929, and museums were also set up by the city councils and other organizations. The fifth one was the post-independence era, 1947 to present. After India gained independence, the museum movement continued to grow, helping preserve the country's rich cultural heritage. So, introduction to the new museology. So, new museology basically a contemporary approach to museum practices. Basically, it emerged in the late 20th century as a response to the changing societal attitudes and expectations towards the museum. Because with changing time, people का जो attitude था towards the museum that also got changed. So, to stand on that expectation, इस approach को museums में लागू किया गया. They followed this approach to stand the changing societal attitudes and expectations of the people towards the museum. So unlike traditional museology जो basically focus करती थी on the presentation and display of the artifacts in a detached and authoritative manner. Detached बोले तो उनका वो बस focus करती थी कि यार display कर देना है, इसको इस तरीके से present करना है, but वो कुछ भी concept या inclusivity या फिर participatory approach offer नहीं करती so that जो public है वो उस artifact से उसके background से interact कर पाए. They basically used to present things in a detached manner. But जो new museology है इसका approach काफ़ी डिफरेंट है. इसने अपने अंदर पार्टिसिपेटरी, इंक्लूसिव, सोशली इंगेजिंग अप्रोच रखा है टुवर्ड्स द म्यूजियम वर्क सो दैट जो भी पब्लिक या फिर जो भी ऑडियंस है दे कैन इंगेज विद द आर्टिफैक्ट्स एंड दे कैन इंगेज विद इन द म्यूजियम वर्क और वो क्रिटिकली एग्जामिन भी कर पाएँ. सो देयर आर सेवरल फीचर्स ऑफर्ड बाय द न्यू म्यूजियोलॉजी. बेसिकली ये सारे अप्रोचेज है जो न्यू म्यूजियोलॉजी के अंदर आते हैं. सो फर्स्ट इज़ द पार्टिसिपेटरी अप्रोच. सो न्यू म्यूजियोलॉजी जो है वो ये रिकॉग्नाइज करता है कि जो विजिटर्स आए वो अपना खुद का नॉलेज, एक्सपीरियंस और पर्सपेक्टिव लेके आए म्यूजियम और वो इंटरेक्टिव एग्जीबिशन और प्रोग्राम भी रन करते हैं सो दैट दे कैन इंकरेज द एक्टिव पार्टिसिपेशन ऑफ द पब्लिक. दिस कुड इन्वॉल्व द हैंड्स ऑन एक्टिविटीज, डिजिटल इंस्टॉलेशन, participatory art projects where visitor can contribute their own creations. So basically उनका main मकसद होता है to involve visitors in the learning process because they basically want to engage the audience with the museum work because they believe that they can create a more meaningful and memorable experience by involving the visitors or the participants in the learning process. Next feature is contextualization. So contextualization is basically about providing the necessary background information. बेसिकली इट मीन्स दैट जो भी आर्टिफैक्ट्स रखे हुए हैं या फिर जो भी एग्जीबिशन के लिए जो भी डिस्प्ले में रखा हुआ है ऑब्जेक्ट्स, सो बेसिकली ऑडियंस को उससे रिलेटेड इन्फॉर्मेशन प्रोवाइड करना, वेदर इट इज हिस्टोरिकल, सोशल और कल्चरल कॉन्टेक्स्ट, ताकि जो विजिटर्स हैं वो उससे कनेक्शंस बना पाए और उसका डीपर मीनिंग वो समझ पाए. फॉर एग्जांपल देख लो, लाइक रादर दैन कोई अगर एंशिएंट आर्टिफैक्ट्स वो डिस्प्ले कर रहे हैं तो म्यूजियम का फोकस होना चाहिए कि वो उसका हिस्टोरिकल, सोशल, पॉलिटिकल ये सब बैकग्राउंड दे ताकि जो विजिटर है वो उससे इंटरेक्ट कर पाए और प्रेजेंट डे में उसका क्या सिग्निफिकेंस है और पास्ट में वो कैसे इवॉल्व किया है वो उससे वो कनेक्शन बना पाए और मोर इंटरेक्टिव वे में उसका डीपर मीनिंग वो समझ पाए. Next important feature of new museology is inclusivity. So inclusivity is a central tenet of new museology. Basically, inclusivity, this approach focuses on representing diverse perspectives and voices within the museum spaces. It adopts this approach by including inclusivity by telling stories that reflect the experiences of a wide range of communities, mostly who are marginalized groups or communities, so that they can reach to a wider range of audience. So basically they involve the contribution of women, indigenous people, immigrants, LGBTQ plus individuals and other marginalized groups. They tell their story and try to involve a large number of participants. By embracing diversity and inclusivity, museum can create a more welcoming and accessible spaces for all the visitors. Next important feature is collaboration. So collaboration is essential in new museology, both within the museum and with external partners. Museum collaborate with community, organizations, artists, scholars and other stakeholders to develop exhibit programs that reflect diverse perspective and interest. So another important feature is collaboration. जो new museology है उसमें collaborative approach रखा जाता है so that they can collaborate with the community, organization, artists, scholars एंड डिफरेंट प्रोग्राम्स, ताकि डिफरेंट और डाइवर्स पर्सपेक्टिव और इंटरेस्ट को रिफ्लेक्ट किया जा सके इन द म्यूजियम वर्क. So this collaboration approach ensures that the museum remain relevant and responsive to the need and interest of their communities. Another important approach is the critical engagement. So new museology encourages visitors to critically engage, because they ask the visitors to come with their experience, knowledge and perspective, and then they critically examine the museum work. So challenging the traditional narratives and fostering dialogues and debates. Museum provides opportunity for the visitors to ask questions, express their opinion and explore different point of view. Why they do so? Because this can lead to a deeper understanding of complex issues and a more active form of learning. Then further it is given the example of the Indian Museum in Kolkata, that how it adopted the principles of new museology and how it provided the inclusive, participatory and collaborative spaces for the public. So let's see this, that how it is following or exemplifies these principles of new museology. So firstly, the Indian Museum has introduced interactive exhibits that allows visitor to engage with the artifacts in hand-on ways. For example, instead of merely viewing sculptures or artifacts behind glass, visitors can participate in activities such as pottery making workshop, textile weaving demonstrations and interactive digital installations that bring historical scenes to life. So it firstly adopts the participatory approach, that it installs digital installations, hands-on activities, organize various interactive programs and workshops so that the participants can engage. Instead of just looking the artifacts behind the glass, they can involved in the participatory approach and can learn things in a more engaging way. Museums regularly host community events, workshops, and outreach programs that invite local residents to actively participate in the museum activity. So museum जो है वो regularly host करते रहता है community events, workshops, outreach programs, interactive sessions, so that जितने भी local residents हैं, they can actively participate in the museum activities. Second approach is the exhibits at the Indian Museum are designed to provide visitors with the necessary historical, social. So basically, secondly, it conceptualizes things that the visitors can relate the historical, social, and political background of the artifacts that are being displayed. So they can connect more and they can evaluate the situation that was in the past and to the present time. The museum emphasizes the connection between past and present, highlighting how historical events, traditions, and cultural practices continue to shape contemporary life in India. That is what I said. And also ये जो आपका conceptualization वाला ये जो approach है, it helps visitor to understand the relevance and of the museum's collection to their own life and experience. So they can relate it with their own life and experiences and can engage with the artifacts and in the museum work. Another important feature that is adopted by the Indian Museum is they strive to pose inclusivity. So basically they strive to represent the diverse perspective and voices within its exhibits and programs. So they do so by implementing various things like they ensure the initiative that exhibits and facilities are accessible to the visitors of all ages. Museum have implemented accessibility initiative. They have taken accessibility initiative to ensure कि जितने भी exhibits या जो भी facilities है वो सारे visitors को available हो of all the ages and abilities. उसमें कोई भी उनको discrimination या कुछ भी face ना करना पड़े. तो ये क्या क्या इंक्लूड करता है? दे प्रोवाइड व्हील चेयर रैम्प्स, टैक्टाइल एग्जिबिट्स फॉर विजुअली इम्पेयर्ड विजिटर्स एंड ऑडियो गाइड्स इन मल्टीपल लैंग्वेजेस, सो दैट दे कैन फील दैट इंक्लूसिविटी और वो अच्छी तरीके से इंगेज कर पाए विद द म्यूजियम वर्क. Another important function is collaboration. So Indian Museum जो है वो collaborate करता है with the local communities, artists, scholars, cultural organizations, ताकि वो develop कर सके exhibits और program to reflect the diverse interests and needs of the diverse audience, ताकि वो सबके needs, point of view, perspective, voices को represent कर सके. These collaborations help the museum to remain relevant and responsive to the cultural dynamics of the region. म्यूजियम सिर्फ लोकल कम्युनिटीज़ तक ही कोलैबोरेशन नहीं करता, बट म्यूजियम्स ऑल्सो एंगेज इन इंटरनेशनल कोलैबोरेशन. इंटरनेशनल कोलैबोरेशंस भी होता है विद अदर म्यूजियम्स एंड कल्चरल इंस्टीट्यूशंस, एंड इन दैट दे ट्राई टू एंगेज इन एक्सचेंजिंग नॉलेज, एक्सपर्टाइज एंड आर्टिफैक्ट्स. Another important principle of new museology that the Indian Museum is following, that they are providing the critical engagement approach to their audience, so that the exhibits at the Indian Museum can often present multiple perspectives of the historical events. They can even ask multiple questions, raise their voice, and they can put their viewpoints. So this approach basically encourages the visitors to think critically about the narrative presented in the museum and to engage with the complexity of the history and culture. So conclusion is that overall Indian Museum जो कि कोलकाता में है serves as a prime example of how museum can adopt the principles of new museology. It is very perfectly showing the example that how it is following the principles of new museology to create a dynamic, inclusive, engaging space for learning, collaboration and cultural exchange. So basically this is the main function of the new museology. It is the main feature that it provides dynamic, inclusive, engaging space ताकि learning, exploration और cultural exchange काफ़ी आसानी से और काफ़ी easy तरीके से हो सके. Through these approaches, the museum has transformed to a vibrant cultural institution that reflects the rich diversity of India's heritage and fosters a dialogue and understanding among its visitors. So basically, it is representing the diverse culture, the diverse perspective, the diverse voices of its visitors.